to read some scriptures, and then after that I give him a chance to do an introduction himself, and then we might have some questions for him. I have to be at another meeting at 7 in this building, so you'll see me leave about at least by 2 till 7, and I mean that as a comfort to you. Nobody else will be under any requirement, although you're welcome to linger longer. I don't anticipate this gathering going any beyond that. And if you have to leave beforehand, that's just fine and understandable too. But I've been thinking again today about pilgrimage. I've actually been looking at a book over the weekend called History of Pilgrimage to the Holy Land, more for the idea of pilgrimage itself. And in this book, it talks about the fact that the pattern of pilgrimage to the Holy Land goes back, well, to the beginning of scriptural history. And I've asked John if he would read a verse from Genesis 12:1, and then one from Deuteronomy 16:16. Each of them have in it a footprint of people making a pilgrimage to the Holy Land.
Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you."
So we hear early in Genesis how Abram himself makes a pilgrimage, and at the exhortation of the Lord, calling him and directing him to go, his own journey there, at the beginning of the history of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, his response to the call of God, the work of the Spirit, the Ruach in his life as he makes that journey. And then Deuteronomy 16:16 speaks particularly of the people of Israel making pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And you can say something about that.
I'll say something as the verse says.
Yeah.
3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place which he will choose, at the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, and at the feast of booths. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed.
So you're hearing from Deuteronomy this scriptural exhortation to go 3 times a year to Jerusalem as a pilgrimage, to the temple for thanks sacrifice there. And we're expanding that because it's not just males but females we're taking on this trip together. By my count, we have about 23 here tonight, not counting David, and so we're taking beyond that, but this is probably the largest gathering of the group we've had at any one moment. Let me open us with a prayer. Holy God, we read how from the beginning you call us, you call your people, and you call us to be journeying, particularly to this holy land. Make us mindful of the communion of saints, of those who have made a journey like this before us, who have gone to this same land, and who have encountered the presence of the living God there. Help us to approach it with reverence, but a reverence marked by fellowship and laughter and good health, and indeed all of the aspects that nurture faith. And through your Spirit, inspire us in this journey also to make it a journey surrounded by prayer. When we pray, remembering how Jesus said, "Follow me," to those who would be his disciples. Amen. Now I want to do, I think it's a good investment of some time, again, just the exercise of going around and saying your names, because I want you to be comfortable with each other's names. And maybe if this time, in addition to your names, you'd say something about who you are in connection to this wider community, or if you don't have a connection, if this trip is your first connection to the wider community, or if you have a family member or a friend or someone who's on this trip with you, even if they're not here tonight, so people can start to put names and faces together. I'll start. I'm John Debevoise. And this will be my 3rd time to Israel. And I'm this time grateful to be going with other pastors. They're not here tonight, but my brother, Dan Debevoise, and my sister-in-law, Helen Debevoise, who are pastors at the Park Lake Presbyterian Church in Orlando, will also be coming on this trip. I don't have a rabbi going with me this time, but I expect that there's one or two of those we can find in Israel already. And we also have a seminarian going with us on this trip, and my nephew, John Daniel. And I don't anticipate that this will be my last trip. I expect to go again, and I've had people from this congregation already come and ask me, please go again so that we can be a part of it next time as well. And I'm going to ask Beth and John to go next. I'll start with John, and then I'll come back up to the Calfies and go around that way.
I'm the real John Debevoise. I go by John Daniel Debevoise. I'm the pastoral intern here at Palmacia Presbyterian. Like you said, my parents are going as well. Helen and Dan, they're co-pastors in Orlando. And we just have a weird family connection.
And you've never been before. This is your first time?
Right, I've never been to Israel.
And you're going to seminary, what date?
July 8th.
July 8th. And you are?
And I'm Beth Debevoise. I'm John's daughter, John Daniel's cousin, and the niece of my Uncle Dan and Aunt Helen. And I went on the trip in 2016 that we took through the same tour travel company.
And Beth is my administrative assistant for this trip. She's doing all the heavy, well, as David and his team have figured out already, she's the really significant person in terms of the communications. And I appreciate that very much from her. And you'll see me turn to her a lot as we keep doing this, because she's a wonderfully detail-oriented person who keeps my T's crossed and my I's dotted. And you're going with somebody traveling with you.
My husband, Scott Wilson, is going. He's working tonight, so he couldn't be here, but he sets me up with the equipment.
Because he's a photojournalist.
Yep.
He works for Fox 13, and so we're particularly grateful he's going because he's agreed to be our official photographer on this trip. I know there's a lot of photographers that are going, and we're grateful for that, but Scott's a wonderfully fine professional photographer and will bring some skills to bear that I think will bless us all in things that we're gifted with after we get back.
I'm Nancy Calfee. This is our first trip to Israel.
And you're going with?
Her husband, Carlton.
You all have actually traveled quite a bit before. I know, because you've been to Austria, you've been to Ireland, you've been to France.
Our travel buddies, right?
And we went to Poland with Nicole.
And to Poland with Nicole, right. So it's only good that you come to Israel with me. And your traveling buddies, folks you frequently travel with are?
I'm Marcia Rydberg. And this is our second trip. Our first trip was on a regular commercial venture, and we wanted to do more of a pilgrimage. So
About how long ago was that trip?
he's the one with the brains.
It was about 3 years ago.
Three.
Three.
Yeah.
So I love the trip, but I got to tell you, what I absolutely love is Galilee. And I have opinions. One of my opinions is that is a Christian movie. It is. That's basically all the works of wonders.
He said the Christian Holy Land.
The Christian Holy Lands in Galilee. You will love Galilee. I have a tough time in Jerusalem. It was crowded and very commercial, but you will love Galilee.
And this is Tom.
Tom and Marcia are traveling together. They're a couple, married couple. Yeah. Marcia's the past moderator of our presbytery, and is also one of the folks whose biblical knowledge has been a blessing to me already many times. And jumping down on the other side of John Daniel.
That's me. I'm Marilyn Friends. I'm a member of the Temple Oratorio Singers. I was on the waiting list back in October. Moved from 5 to 3.
You've traveled with folks from this church before, because in the fall
With choir.
you went to Ireland.
And also Paris 2 years ago.
And you got vetted both times positively by that group. Yeah. So I figured if you were able to survive the choir traveling, you'll do really well on this trip. Yeah. And next to you?
I'm Kathy Urtel. Marilyn and I are going to room together. I've been a member of Palmacia for like maybe 30 years or something. I've always wanted to go to the Holy Land. I've never been. I didn't really want to go at the end of June, so I'm happy that this trip is in April. So I'm looking forward to it.
Kathy, you're a retired teacher? Right?
School psychologist.
Yeah. And
I'm Frank Cooper. been a member of Common since the early 80s. This is my second trip. I went back in March of 2000. Somehow we got with the Yale College group. It's more of a secular trip. Like 3 weeks. Excited about it.
And next to you?
We got a lot of devil boys going, which is a good thing.
I'm Mitzi Cooper, and it's my first time going, and I'm just so excited. Thank you so much.
I'm Carol Wells, and I've never been. I'm a preacher's kid, and my dad went to the Holy Land in the 60s as a young minister, and he water skied on the Sea of Galilee. And then my sister's ashes are spread on the Sea of Galilee. So I'm excited to go to it.
What was your maiden name? Your father's name?
Crane Sealing.
I'm John Wells. I'm going with Carol, and also a preacher's kid, and never have been. So I'm looking forward to doing this for sure. Glad to go with you guys.
Carol and John are both engineers.
I'm Pat Cappy. I've been attending here since the 60s, actually, when I was in high school across the street. And I'm going with my good friend Gail. We've been on these kind of spiritual journeys to Assisi, and we went to Lourdes and Medjugorje, and this has been at the top of the list, so it came along. Tried to go once before, and then something political or violent happened, so the trip was canceled. So now we're just really excited.
Patricia and I have not only been in the same congregation for 25 years, but we were neighbors for 25 years, too.
My name is Gail Savini, and I am a member of Christ the King Catholic Church. But I'm so happy to be able to go with you and Pat. I've been to the Middle East many times. I've been to Lebanon, particularly many times. My husband's Lebanese. He's Catholic. I hope it's not a problem. My last name is an Arabic last name. So I'm really excited. Israel has been on the top of my list. We could never go through Lebanon to get there. You can't do it. So this is a great chance to get to come with Common Presbyterian.
We're glad you're here.
I'm very happy. I'm very, very happy. Thank you.
And next to you?
I'm Linda Sanford, and I was actually confirmed in this church. My whole family came here as a kid. I went to Plant High School in the 60s, so I know who were there together. And I lived in San Diego for about 4 years, and came back, and I'm thrilled to be back here all the time. I've traveled a lot, but not to the Holy Land. And I think every Christian should go. And I just got back from a couple of trips overseas. The timing's not great, but this is a wonderful opportunity to go with people from church.
We're glad that you're
Can't wait.
going ahead and doing it. Yeah.
Me, Kathy Pereira. I joined the church, I guess, when I was 30. Something like that, so it's been about 35 years ago. And when I joined the church, Chuck Greenwood, who was the minister at that point, asked me to direct the children's choir, and I was directing the children's choir. And I'm part of the adult choir, and I also ring bells in the church. So I'm pretty active in regards to that. I grew up actually High Park Presbyterian in Tampa, so I'm a native Tampian. And we moved, I went to college and came back, and they had moved over here, and I'm like, okay, you know. So never been to the Holy Land. Had a trip scheduled, and got canceled. So I went to Russia instead that time. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's not only an opportunity to actually go, but what makes the difference is the pilgrimage with the group. It's kind of the same thing when the choir goes on a trip. It's one thing to see Paris, it's another thing to sing in Notre Dame. I mean, it just takes it a step higher. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, the choir goes is a little bit more of a pub crawl. This is more of a pilgrimage. They both start with the letter P, but it's very different. Colonel?
Hi, I'm Dick Roth. I'm still the Phantom Traveler. This is the first meeting I've been to. I live in Waimama, so it's kind of a long drag to come back in. So that's my excuse anyway. But so this is the first meeting. I have been to the Middle East quite a few times. And the trip to Israel was canceled. So I've been to Turkey, Iran, Egypt, all around the area. So I'm looking forward to this.
Dick's being a little modest. He's a retired United States Air Force colonel and is a fighter pilot, jet fighter pilot. And he also, I think, was the commander of a wing that was stationed in Turkey for a period of time. And so I have had the pleasure not only of being his pastor, but also being his traveling buddy in France. We were in the back of the bus together a lot. I was batching at that trip, and I'm just really glad he's decided to come this time again. Welcome.
I'm Anita Steinfeld. I met Pastor John by joint talks with Rabbi Bernholtz here at Congregation Shahar Zedek. So when you talked about this trip, I mentioned it to you, and my daughter will be my companion. She's a member of the Leewood Presbyterian Church in Kansas, and when I mentioned it to her, she just jumped at the opportunity.
So it's an interfaith family. We don't have a synagogue and a congregation going, but we've got a mother and daughter going. One from a Presbyterian church in Kansas and the other from Shahar Zedek here.
So we'll learn a lot from each other and from you all.
Yeah.
So I've never been to Israel, and this is going to be a great opportunity.
I'm so glad you're able to be with us.
Thank you. I think we were one of the first to sign up. I heard there was a waiting list that you all finally made.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it was a year ago we said, hey, let's do this. And now it's almost here.
Here it is. Yeah.
I am Barbara Bachman, and I've never been to the Holy Land. And last year, Lee and I heard some preliminary things about this trip, so we were eager to sign up, and then when it didn't happen, we ended up going to Scandinavia instead. So when this happened this year, we were ready to sign up. So I am really thrilled to go. I've traveled a lot, but never to the Holy Land, and really looking forward to this pilgrimage.
Welcome, Barbara. I'm glad you're going as well. Barbara has had a long and wonderful career as a physician here in the Tampa Bay area.
I'm Lee Marks, and I think Barbara really talked me into this. This was not on my list. I said, I'm not a doubting Thomas. I can just believe abstractly that Jesus really lived and he did those things. But I'm excited now to see where he actually walked and what he looked at after reading the Jesus book. And I'm the first member of my family of origin to go to the Holy Land. This is my first trip. And they're a whole family of Presbyterians, PCUSA elders, and I'm the first one to go to the Holy Land, so I'm excited.
I am too. Barbara's a doctor of nursing and does research here in Tampa.
I'm Wendell Gertner. My wife Corinne is working late at the office, but we've been at the church long enough to raise 3 daughters. We've never been to Israel, but this is the first trip that happened when all 3 daughters are out of the house. So we're taking advantage of that.
Wendell and Corinne and Barbara and the Wells are all parents of 3 daughters going on this trip. I don't think there's another one. Just a fun fact. David? That's a record.
Okay. I'm on?
You're on.
ערב טוב. אני אדבר איתכם בעברית, נכון? Oh, you don't know yet. By the time you return here, you will be able to understand what I just said, which was good evening. I'm going to talk in Hebrew, but I won't. So, nice to see you all. Very excited to hear where you all are in your lives vis-a-vis this trip. And if we had 6 hours, I know we only have 3 hours, but if we had 6 hours, I could retrace every hour of every day on my first trip to Israel, which, by the way, is still not over. I came in 1969 from England on a 2-month ticket, and I'm still there. That's 50 years ago. So I'm still on my first trip, but the official first trip, I could retrace not every hour, just about every minute, if we had the time. It made, of course, my background is a little bit different, and maybe we'll come to that in a second. So just to respond very briefly to one or two things that I heard around the table. First of all, sorry, I'm outranked, major in the Air Force, in the Israeli Air Force, but Colonel, you have it. Secondly, I didn't know you were going to bring this book. In fact, I didn't know there were going to be any books here. But one of the authors of this book, Teddy Kollek, is the legendary mayor of Jerusalem, who was actually invited to my wedding. He didn't come, but he was invited to my wedding. That's Teddy Kollek, the mayor of Jerusalem. Yeah. Why was he invited to my wedding? And that's the kind of introduction for me to introduce myself, because he came originally from Vienna, and so did both of my parents. That was the connection. So in short, and I'm going to leave tons of time for your questions. Don't worry about that. I'll just speak for 3 or 4 minutes introducing myself. So my parents managed to escape from Vienna in 1938. And my mother was 10 years old, and she was on the Kindertransport. If you don't know what that was, I'm sure you'll learn the history during the course of your trip. She and her younger sister, age 4, were sent by my grandparents to England, and they were adopted there by a family. My father, in 1938, was finishing his medical studies at the university. He was unable to persuade his parents to leave with him, because he was fortunate to get a visa to Shanghai that was issued by the Chinese consul at the time, Dr. Ho, who was giving visas to Jewish people to save them against the will of his government. Thousands of people were saved like that, including my father. When he had the permission to leave the country, he went to the British consulate and received permission to visit Palestine, as it was at the time, 1938. So he had no intention of going on to China. So he spent 4 years in Palestine, and there he joined the British Army, ended up in England, which is where he met my mother. And as I say, the rest is history. So I was born in England, hence the funny accent that you can hear. But when I finished high school, being 1969 and being the 60s and being Jewish and growing up in a mildly traditional background but very Zionist home, my first priority was to see the lay of the land. And as I explained before, it's not over yet, and I'm still there and still breathing, and every day is more excitement and more things happening. So that's how I made it to Israel in 1969. I lived 20 years or so on a kibbutz, which, if you're interested, I can tell you a little bit about. I was a farmer, I was a teacher, I did my military service and retired from my reserve duty only in 2001. And then for the last 30 years I've been doing what I do now, which is to organize meaningful experiences in Israel and other places in the Jewish world for people like yourselves coming from overseas, mainly from this country and some from Canada. We're delighted that you're coming on this trip, and not for the first time, for the second time. And I've already made a note that there's another trip, so we'll get the date soon and we'll start working very soon. Because, as you will notice when you come, tourism is booming. It's steadily rising all the time. There are more and more visitors coming. We're delighted by that. It challenges us because there are limited accommodations and the country is very small. If you've read anything about Israel, you probably already know that the total size of Israel, the total landmass, is less than New Jersey. We just make a lot of noise, you know, so it seems to be bigger than it is. And 2/3 of our country is desert. So it's fairly easy to get around, and in no time you'll see the lay of the land, and you'll, I hope, have a meaningful impression and a memorable trip to Israel. So that's by way of an introduction who I am. I want to start actually by answering your questions, and then if there are certain things that you'd like to hear more about that are mentioned in the itinerary, I'll be happy to go into that. I will not encroach on Mike's territory. He's the licensed tour guide, and he will teach you along the way. But if there are specific questions that I can answer, I'll be happy to do so.
I'll give you two as openers, all right?
Please.
And one is, if you spoke of Mike as the licensed tour guide, would you say something about the Department of Tourism in Israel? I mean, I don't think the United States has a Department of Tourism, and what it means that Mike is a licensed tour guide, what the connotation of that is in Israel.
Sure. We take tourism very seriously in Israel. There is a minister of tourism. There is a whole department of tourism, and you cannot, if you know your way around the country and you're well spoken and well versed and perhaps even studied history or something, you cannot just jump on a bus and take guests and explain to them, if you look to the left you'll see this, if you look to right you'll see that. You have to have a license, and there are inspectors from the ministry who actually stop buses from time to time to check that the person who is speaking on the microphone is qualified and licensed. And not only do you have to study for 2 years for your license at university, you have to maintain your license by twice a year spending a day studying something that you haven't yet studied. It's a kind of a short day course. And if you don't do that, you simply lose your license. It's like, well, pilots also have to keep if you have a civilian license, you have to keep it up by flying a number of hours. Exactly the same with our guides. So we take it very seriously. And I think you will enjoy every moment with Mike, who is one of our dear colleagues, extremely knowledgeable, very personal, great sense of humor. By the way, until this stage in the program, nobody has said the word fun. I'm a great believer in fun. This is, you should enjoy this trip. You should laugh. You'll probably cry a little bit too. That's okay. But it has to be fun, and that will be part of the memory that you will take with you from the trip. So,
I'll do the follow. I told the group yesterday I'd ask this, and told David, one of the things we've watched with interest and some concern was the firing of the 2 rockets last week from Gaza towards Tel Aviv. And I gave my answer about why I was still going with confidence and peace about that. But I said I would ask you and let you speak to something not only about that event, but your assessment of the current security situation there too.
your safety and your security are our primary concern. And that is the most important statement I'm going to make this evening. Nothing is more important than your welfare and your well-being. And we're not in the risk-taking business, so if there is the slightest risk at any point in time, we will protect you from any risk that we are aware of. How do we do that? It's very simple. All the programs that we produce, like this one, and like hundreds of others, in fact, thousands of others, are monitored by a body which is called the National Touring Authority. National Touring Authority, interestingly, is run by the Ministry of not Defense, not Tourism, any other guesses? Not Trade and whatever it is, not Health, not Finance, not Security, no, by the Ministry of Education. Why? Because it's the same authority that monitors all the trips taken by anybody in Israel, including our children, my grandchildren in this case. All the schools who go on any trips anywhere are all monitored by the same body. The touring part is just a small piece of the operation that they have. There is a situation room which operates 364 days a year. The one day they don't operate is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Nobody's traveling, nobody's on the roads, no need for the situation room. All other times, 24/7, representatives of all these services, all the relevant services, sit together. Police, fire brigade, medical, secret service, all the IDF, you name it. The list is much longer, and they all sit together and monitor what is going on the various places in the country. Now, most times, everything is quiet and there's nothing for them to do except continue to watch, to be aware of what's going on. And they don't take it from the news. There are people on the ground that are constantly passing the information forward. They analyze it, and if necessary, they will say, this trip here, and I'll take an example from real time. Not now, but from the summer. Oh, yes, this trip is going to be on the Golan Heights, and there's a bushfire actually started a couple of hours ago, and I see that this itinerary is going to go on the road, which would go right through where the bushfire is. So let's keep them out of danger. Who's the contact number? Oh, it's DART. Okay, let's call DART. DART bus number, whatever it is, trip number, whatever it is, on June the 13th, you're supposed to be going there. Well, just know that there's a bushfire, so take an alternative route. And that's what we do. You don't know about it. You don't need to know about it. The guide will know about it. The bus driver will know about it. End of story. And I take that as a real example. It happens all the time. Other things which are more serious, and you asked me specifically about the rockets, in some situations there may be a necessity to take extra precautions, in which case we do that. We don't ask any permission to do that, we just do it. And in some cases, the analysis is there's nothing that needs to be done, no special precautions. What might the precautions be? In extreme circumstances, which hasn't happened for over 15 years, there would be perhaps an armed guard with you on the bus. I think 2003 or 2004 was the last time that was necessary. When the rockets were fired, just a couple of days ago, there was a situation where nobody knew how that was going to develop. Is this going to be a conflagration into another round of conflict between us and the Palestinians, or yes or no? I don't think anybody on either side exactly knew how that was going to develop, but it was a very typical incident of things that happen in the Middle East. Things escalate very quickly. What's the opposite? De-escalate?
Right.
And they de-escalate just as fast. So it happened at 9 o'clock in the night, and I think 12 hours later, or certainly no more than 24 hours later, it's a thing of the past. So much so that I was reading some commentary. In many places around the world, it wasn't even reported. It was a non-event. Now, living in Israel, it was definitely an event. But as far as other people are concerned, it was a non-event. Now, I'm not saying it was not a non-event, it was a real event, but it would be analyzed by the same people in the Situation Room, and should they have decided that because of the response, which was different from what it actually was in fact, they may have said, this area is to be avoided, and we would change the program immediately and avoid any being exposed to any risk whatsoever. Because as I said in the beginning, your safety is the most important thing that we have. Okay? We will deliver you safely back home to Tampa, so we can sit around the table and talk about the wonderful trip that you had. If anybody wants to go into more detail, we can dwell on that, or you can catch me when we're over the more official piece. Yes, and the next question is from?
While they think of a question, we'll ask you, let me ask one more. Would you say something about, if you'd say something, I haven't talked to them at all about this, Beth may have in an email, I don't recall you did, but would you say something about the exchange of currency? Is that something that you recommend?
Yes.
They do here, there, the use of credit cards there? What words of coaching?
Okay. It's very easy. ATMs all over the place. You need to be sure that you have a credit card with 4 digits, with the passcode of 4 digits. I understand that today there are some with 5. That doesn't work. If you have a 4-digit PIN code on your credit card, you're fine. You need to advise your credit card company that you're going to be traveling abroad. Otherwise, they'll suddenly see that somebody's trying to withdraw from this strange land with your credit card, and they will block it. So you need to tell them that you're going to be away in Israel, so they'll recognize it. In terms of the exchange rate, currently it's in the region of 3.6 shekels for the dollar, more or less. It goes up and down a little bit, down to 3.5, 3.4, up to 3.7, but that's the fluctuation for your calculations. And in terms of changing money, don't change money here under any circumstances, because the rate that you will get is ridiculous. You can change money when you arrive at the airport. There will be time to do that. But as I said, there are ATMs absolutely everywhere. And the easiest thing to do is with your credit card, just take out as many shekels as you need along the way. You will need to pay in shekels. When the dollar was doing a little bit better in the international arena, some businesses would accept dollars. Today, that's almost non-existent. So if you're going to have a meal on your own, or you want to buy you want to go shopping or buy presents or whatever, most things you can pay by credit card, most things, but shekels in cash will be needed, and Mike, your guide, will give you advice on how much approximately, how much you'll need for tomorrow, how much the next day, so you can be prepared for that. You won't be surprised all of a sudden that the bus stops and you have to buy your own lunch and you haven't got any money to do that. All that will be announced in good time. Yeah.
Do the hotels have the ATM machines, or do you need to go out to a bank?
I'm just trying to think. You're saying at the Tal and Ginosar and in Jerusalem. Dan Panorama, yes. I don't recall that they have inside the hotels, but very close to all of them. ATMs all over the place. Absolutely no difficulty to find them and to use them. Yes, please.
What about credit cards? Is this something they do or don't take or prefer?
If you have money in your account, they will take any credit card, yes.
Was it difficult to learn Hebrew? Was it difficult for you?
To learn Hebrew? I never learned Hebrew. I came with no Hebrew. I never went to, Ulpan is the name in Hebrew for the Hebrew school for those people who are newcomers, and they usually do some course or something. I came with nothing, but I was thrown in at the deep end, and I was very fortunate that in my first years, I worked with people who were very, very patient and spoke to me only in Hebrew. So I had no choice but to understand and to speak back to them in Hebrew. And then in January 1972, I did my regular service in the army. And there you've really got no choice. It's sink or swim, you know. If you don't understand, that's a problem. So you learn very quickly when you're in the army, because everything is in Hebrew.
But you got to be an 04, so you must have picked up pretty well.
I'm sorry?
He doesn't understand that.
No, I didn't hear you well.
You said you became an 04, which would be major.
Yeah.
So you must have picked it up pretty well.
I did okay. Yes, I did okay. It's fine. Yes. Yes, sir.
What's going to surprise us the most?
Great question.
Would you mind repeating the question, David?
The question is, what's going to surprise us most? And that is a question that I often ask our visitors in Israel when I come to visit. And I will, unfortunately, while you're there, I'm just at the beginning of a 3-week trip to the United States. So I'm not actually going to see you on the ground in Israel. Normally, last time I came to visit you in the hotel in Tel Aviv, and when I come, I pick people randomly and I ask them exactly the same question. I say, out of all the things that you've seen, what surprised you most? I'll give you 2 answers. They're not mine. This is what I've heard from the majority of people who I ask this question. One, that the country is so small. That everything is so close and the country is so small. We went to Haifa and we went to the Golan Heights, and that's it. That's the whole deal, you know. Haifa's on the coast, on the Mediterranean Sea, and the Golan is next to Syria, and that's the end of it. But we did that in an hour and a half. That's the whole deal. So the size of the country. Second, and it relates in a way to the rockets, it's a normal country. People are hanging out all over the place. The coffee bars are full, the restaurants are full, the theaters are full. In Israel, we have the highest proportion in the world of theater goers per capita. The highest proportion in the world, and they're always full. And the cinemas. And you'll see the markets. Everybody's just getting on with the normal life. As far as life is normal, but that's another discussion. How normal it? Well, what is normality? That's a different discussion. But people say, we were expecting to be tense, and the situation. It's a regular country with regular people. And the next question is.
Can you tip in American dollars or just Israeli dollars or anything?
You should you should do all your transactions in shekels if you can.
Okay.
Yes.
So I received an e-ticket. I know from conversation, some people have not received their e-ticket, and I want to change seats on what has been assigned to me. So I did call the company, and they were supposed to get back to me. They have not done so yet.
When did you call?
Friday.
Since
They were calling me today, but I'll call them again tomorrow.
call tomorrow, right? If you spoke to them on Friday, they have nobody to speak to until Sunday. Sunday was yesterday, as far as I know.
Right.
I'm still a little bit jet lagged because I only just arrived in this country. But
So I'm talking to Israel.
yes, when you call if you call the 1-800 number, you're calling my colleagues who sit in our office in Tel Aviv. It's a night shift in Israel, but.
Is that difficult to change, though, since the e-ticket's already been established?
I don't want to make a statement about that. If you ask them whatever you need, and I'll make sure that they know to expect your call, and I hope you'll have a satisfactory response. Yes, sir.
I have another logistics question. We think that your people answered it. I just want to make sure the answer makes sense. We're not flying out with the group that evening, but it appears we have the hotel that night.
You're talking about the end?
Return flight.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. Yes.
Okay.
If that's what you were told, then that's the situation. Yes. Most likely that's correct. Yes, Kathy.
Why have some people received e-tickets and others of us have not received?
I don't. I just heard about that now, but it's also too late for me to speak to any of my colleagues there. I will do that tomorrow morning, very early, and find out.
Okay.
Sure.
I've never done, the other two times I've been, the Shabbat dinner in homes. We're doing, at the encouragement of Claire and Mike, who were both very encouraging of our doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you'd say something about that
Sure.
to the group.
Yes, we have very positive feedback from groups that experience that, because it's not, I want to make a comparison. It's a genuine, authentic experience, okay? These are not people who are staged, they're not actors, they're not, their mission in life is not to entertain tourists or whatever. They're people who feel strongly or feel passionately about their tradition, about the Jewish religion, and they're happy to share it with guests who come from overseas. So you'll find yourselves in regular homes. Again, they're not mansions and not halls. They're places where people live. You'll meet their families, you'll meet their children, maybe their neighbors too, or their friends, and you'll enjoy the typical Shabbat dinner accompanied by the various traditions that go with that. And there are some blessings, which I think you'll find interesting, and there are some melodies, which I'm pretty sure you'll pick up very quickly, and you'll be able to hum them in your own good time. And you'll meet interesting people, and there'll be a delightful conversation. That's normally what happens when people visit. So, yes.
To follow up on that, will they be speaking English?
Yes, they will speak in English.
Okay, that's my Hebrew, it's just off.
They will. They will.
Sink or swim, okay? You got it.
The second thing, what's the appropriate attire?
Thank you for that question. Casual, casual, casual. And if I didn't say it, casual.
We're
Okay?
not dressing for dinner?
You're not dressing for dinner. No, you're not dressing for dinner. Not even when you're going to be guests in somebody's home. Casual, comfortable. That's the rule.
Thank you.
Are we going to need like a sweater in the evening right now? I mean, does it get chilly?
In Jerusalem, it's likely to be chilly in the evening. Elsewhere, it's going to be probably a little bit warmer. I'm very careful these days when people ask me about weather, and I'll tell you a very funny story. It was a conference call with representatives of, there were about 12 people on the call. I was in Israel, and it was about a week before the trip, similar situation. In fact, now I look at the dates, it was just about the same dates. This must be about 4 or 5 years ago. There was it was a telephone call, and I think the topic of dress came, and then the topic of weather. And I said, oh, you're coming at a time, the rain is finished now, and it's spring, and you can leave all your umbrellas at home, or all your rain gear at home, and just have layers. I said, casual, have layers, so you can add layers or take off layers as needed. They arrived, and we were in Jerusalem the first evening, and I went to see them, because we'd spoken on the phone. I committed to seeing them in person. I even dismissed the bus because the restaurant was close enough to the hotel, it was in walking distance. So I sent the bus home, and we were walking together to the restaurant. Well, he was not on my side that evening, and the heavens opened, and we were drenched in a pouring rain, and we were dodging in private houses just to take some cover just for a few minutes, because maybe it'll lighten up. And by the time we got to the restaurant, we were all soaked. And they didn't forget that. And you told us to leave the umbrellas at home. You said the rain is over. So I'm not going to say the rain is over. It's never over. As time goes on, it's less likely to rain. That's all I can say. It's less likely to rain. But I think you'll find the weather very pleasant. It's absolutely the best time of the year to come. It's not the intense heat somebody mentioned here in June, July, and August. Slight chance of rain. You want to bring your umbrella? Go ahead. Whoops. What I dropped on the floor is actually something very precious. I need to go find it in a second.
It's hard to see in there.
Oh, thank you. Right.
Nice catch.
Yes, thank you. I'm holding this in my hand, actually. It's a conversation piece, because I saw in your program you were going to Caesarea.
The first day.
Yes. So, but I'll tell you the story in a second. I want to be sure that I've answered all your questions first, because the story may take me more than a couple of minutes.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
There are no times on the schedule, or very few. How will you communicate with us, like what time we check out of the hotel?
Everything will be clarified by Mike, using the mic on the mic, day by day, and in some cases several times a day. So every day you will know exactly when to be downstairs in the dining room, when the bus is going to leave. By the way, just as an example, the way we travel is that when we set a breakfast time, we set a time that the bus is going to leave. Bus is going to leave, I'll take an example, 8:30. Each person will then work backwards how long you want to spend having breakfast, what time you want to get up. Sometimes we do a group wake-up call, which we set arbitrarily at a certain time, but you can always change that at the reception desk. You want it earlier, you want it later. Some people like to get up very early, go for a walk or work out or whatever. Some people don't have breakfast in the morning or have a very light breakfast. The breakfast in Israel in the hotels is a very serious business, as you will see very soon. very serious. Huge breakfast, enormous selection wherever you go. So some people like to enjoy all that. But if it's 8:30 the bus is going to leave, you'll be responsible for being there at 8:30. Now generally, if you're going to come for breakfast at 7:45, that's more or less the time that we would allot, 45 minutes for having breakfast and going to the bus. We normally do not allocate time between breakfast and the bus leaving for people to just go back to the room and get something. Because just going back to the room and get something, that's half an hour minimum, which out of respect for those people who are sitting on the bus at 8:30 is going to be a problem. And it's not even half an hour, it could be more, because there's the elevator and you go to the room, I just send that quick text to my family, or just do this and just do that and whatever. It's a never-ending time. So when you come down for breakfast, you come ready to go with your umbrella, with your pouch or your camera or whatever your water bottle, whatever you need for the day. You come ready to go so that we go from breakfast to the bus.
Can I just add?
Yes, please.
Just say, the 2 times that I've gone, this will be my 3rd time, but the other 2 times, that was your question, Carol. I understand why you might ask it, and I think Frank had asked it one of the groups too. We never had any problem with that. Mike was very diligent, and I was intentional about making sure people knew. And if people, in a group of 38 people, if there was somebody who didn't hear at the end for some reason because they were talking to their sister-in-law in Tampa or something at that moment, then they would ask the person next to them, what time did he say? And if you had any questions, you could ask Beth.
And that's part of the reason that we want everyone to get the WhatsApp app on your phone if you can, because I will usually send out that night what time my full via text in the hotel.
It's nice that this is, a nice adult group that's going, so it isn't like we're taking a confirmation class, where we have to go pound on doors and say, wake up. So I don't anticipate any problems with that. There was always somebody who was the last person down every time, but we never had, I remember, any problem with that. We had one guy last time, my brother-in-law, a very responsible person, Bruce, but who tended always to be at the end of the line, wherever we were going. If it was going through a museum or somewhere, he was just usually always so intrigued with something. So we asked Bert to keep his eye on him and make sure that he was getting onto the bus each time. And if we see a problem with somebody, we'll ask Scott or John Daniel to keep their eye on you and make sure that we're not losing anybody.
And we constantly tell people on the bus too.
So now that we know each other a bit better than a half an hour ago, I'll give you something behind the scenes, and this is not related to your group in any way whatsoever. When I brief a guide before a trip begins, I usually say to them, on the first morning, if the departure of the bus is 8:30, you will leave at 8:30 on the dot, with or without all the passengers. That's my instruction to the guide. And the guides who are disciplined and do that, here and there, leave behind 1, 2, maybe even 4 people. It doesn't happen again on the trip. It's that's how you solve it once and for all. On the first morning, you leave on time, and people know that you're serious about leaving on time. Now, it's not related to your trip. Mike will be, you'll see, the chemistry with Mike will be such that you will want to be there. You'll probably want to be there early, because it won't be an issue. But being on time in a group, I don't know how many people have actually traveled in a group before. That's interesting. Very few. So there is a certain dynamic about traveling with a group, which is very positive. It's heartwarming. I could list many advantages of traveling in a group. At the same time, that it demands something. It demands some self-discipline, because you're in a group and in consideration of the group. And I'm sure that it will be fine and it won't be an issue. Yes?
Are there bathrooms on the bus, or do you stop intermittently, or?
The buses stop intermittently. None of it, that's not that we can't afford those buses. They don't exist in Israel because the distances are so small. It's not worth having a bathroom on a bus. It doesn't exist in our country.
On the days that we change hotels, do we have, put our bags out by the door?
That will be explained to you when it actually happens. Yes, there's a whole system about where to put the bag. If you want the bellboy to help with the luggage, that will be explained. And then normally, when the bags are near the bus, each person or a member of each family will come and identify the luggage as it is being loaded, so we don't leave anything behind. Yeah. Yes.
Tipping.
Tipping.
Don't tip ever, tip these people, but not those people.
Eat in a restaurant, you tip. It's tipping in Israel is typically somewhere between 10 to 15%, according to the level of satisfaction. Of course, doesn't have to stop at 15% if you're really happy, and it can be below 10 if it was lousy service. I hope you don't encounter that situation. That would be in a restaurant. A bellboy in a hotel, you could give $1 or $2, whatever. That would be okay. In a dollar note, you wouldn't have to do that in shekels. They'll accept any money. The meals that are included, we've already taken care of the tipping. As far as Mike is concerned, I think you'll take care of that towards the end of the trip. Yes.
Communicate with people about that.
Okay.
Is the kibbutz hotel an active kibbutz, or has it been retrofitted to a hotel?
I promised to say something about kibbutz, so maybe this is time, but you also had a question.
It looks like lunch is on our own almost every day.
Yes.
And what meals are included? Are any of the breakfasts or dinners included?
All breakfasts are included. Some dinners are included, and if in the program you will see, if it doesn't say that dinner is on your own, that means it's included. But every day, as I said, the day before, you'll be told which meals are included and which are not included. Okay? So I'm going to come back to kibbutz, unless there's another question. I'll dwell on that for a little. Yes? Please?
We are going to swim in the Dead Sea. Are there dressing rooms so we don't have before and after?
The answer is yes. Well, yes and no. No, you cannot swim because it's impossible to swim in the Dead Sea. You can only float. You cannot swim. It's physically impossible. But you can float and you will float. And yes, there will be places to change and shower. Yes. Good question. I don't know. But warm enough. It's the lowest place on earth, and it's much warmer than elsewhere in the country. And and people go in the Dead Sea all year round. They go in December and January as well. So. Okay, a few words on kibbutz. I just want to give you the short version. So kibbutzim are communal settlements, the first of which were established about 100 years ago. In the heyday, there were 4% of the population of Israel, numbering about plus minus 300 kibbutzim around the country. And the population of a kibbutz will be anything between 100 people and 1,000 people, living in proximity, working together, sharing everything. The whole idea was socialism, equality. You give as much as you can, and you take as much as you need. And it worked for a long time. Not coincidentally, the kibbutz system that I just described crumbled and kind of began to dissipate exactly at the same time that communism was going down the tubes. Not coincidentally, in the mid-80s. So today, all kibbutzim, with almost no exceptions, are on a timeline of privatization and moving towards capitalist existence in the same place, in the same buildings, in the same places, same locations, but with a whole different philosophy about what they do. Okay? And it's fascinating, and Mike will expand on that a little bit more, but that's what's happening on the kibbutzim. Now, the first kibbutzim that were established were agricultural. They were just living off the land and producing beautiful fruit, vegetables, you name it. And that still goes on today. But I think in the late 60s and early 70s, industries began to pop up on certain kibbutzim. For instance, the one that you may have encountered or read about, drip irrigation was invented on one of the kibbutzim. And there are two very well-known factories. One is on Naan, now belongs to a company in India. One in Hatzerim called Nitafim, whose equipment and whose know-how can be found everywhere across the globe. Drip irrigation, okay? Huge factories. In addition to the factories, some kibbutzim established on the grounds of their kibbutz a guest house, which in the first years was, I'm not going to say primitive, it was basic, but in more recent years has become just as inviting and just as luxurious as some of the hotels that we have. Hence the one that you're going to stay in Kibbutz Ginosar, which is located on the grounds of the kibbutz, in an area which was allocated for the guest house, very close, almost touching, literally touching the Sea of Galilee, and that's where people stay. So technically you're on the kibbutz, but the people who live and work on the kibbutz are 100 yards away from you, but maybe 1,000 miles away from spiritually. They're doing their thing and you're doing your thing. Now, occasionally there is a chance to meet. When I say occasionally, that has to be pre-arranged. We ask for one of the members of the kibbutz to come and have a discussion or a talk or whatever. That can be arranged. But normally, the experience is you are located on the kibbutz, and the fact that you're staying on the kibbutz is you're contributing to the economy of the kibbutz, the livelihood of the people who live there, because they own it. But that's as far as the connection goes. And while I'm talking about kibbutz, I promised to tell you about this little thing here. So I lived on kibbutz for 20 years or so. I met my wife, who was born on a kibbutz. Her parents were founder members of that kibbutz in 1936. The kibbutz moved in 1940 to next door to where you're going to be on Tuesday, April the 2nd. You're going to Caesarea, and the kibbutz you'll go right past it. It's called Sdot Yam. It's located right next door to Caesarea. There was nothing there except sand dunes, and they made it into a beautiful, beautiful place. And next door is the ancient Roman city of Caesarea, which is the second most visited tourist site in the whole of the country, after Masada and the Dead Sea. Our family are no longer living there. We left, and her parents are no longer alive, and my wife's siblings have all left, including one that I'm going to tell you about later, privately, also connected with the Air Force. But from time to time we go back to walk on the beach. And last time I walked on the beach, this is what I found, and I have it in my pocket. It's a Roman coin. I was there in the winter, and these things just wash up, the rain just exposed. And I'm encouraging you that when you go to Caesarea, you keep your eyes open, because I just picked it up literally off the beach, and I have it. I haven't yet cleaned it. I don't know if it's worth anything. I'm sure that the coin experts will be able to identify exactly what's on this side and what's on that side. I haven't had the chance to do that, but you can pass it around and have a look at it. I just picked it up off the beach, and you can do the same. Second recommendation for Caesarea. And I haven't consulted with Mike about this, so I'm going to be very careful the way I describe it. One of the people who lived on the kibbutz that I just described, Sdot Yam, was a very, very famous person called Hannah Senish. She was one of the heroines of our country. Most Israelis would recognize the name immediately. She lived only for 6 months on the kibbutz in 1944. My mother-in-law knew her, obviously, because they were there at that time. She left the kibbutz to join a group of paratroopers. The year is 1944, who were trained by the British, who were then in control of Palestine. And they were sent on a mission to jump behind enemy lines and try and save the Jews of Hungary, Budapest specifically, who were already being shipped off to the camps. She parachuted, but she was betrayed. She was captured, she was tortured, and eventually shot in November. And she was executed. Why do we know so much about Hannah Senish? Because she wrote a diary, and she was a poetess. And her poems and her diary were found by one of the members of the kibbutz in a suitcase on the kibbutz after she was executed. And many of her poems are very well known. One poem specifically, Eli, Eli, Shelo Yigamer La'olam, that's in Hebrew, translated. I don't want to go into the whole translation of the poem, but it's a very, you know what, maybe I'll send it to you afterwards so you can read it. And what I would like you to do, although Mike may have other plans for your time in Caesarea, but you know what, I have to explain. The poem is Eli, Eli, Shelo Yigamer La'olam. My God, it should never end. Achol v'hayam, the sand and the sea. Achol v'hayam, Achol v'hayam. But the lightning in the heavens. And the prayer of man. Loose translation, it's very emotional for me. I probably missed out a line. What I'm trying to say is the following. You are going to be in the place meters away or yards away from where Hannah Senish sat, overlooking the ocean. You'll see the ocean, it's right there. You'll see the sand, you'll hear the sea, you'll feel the wind, I hope. And if you get into the right mindset, you can feel the same inspiration that she had. This is what, and she was a young girl. She was, what, 20-something or when she went on this mission from which she never returned? You can get into that state of mind, how somebody could be so inspired to do what she did, which was a very heroic act. And you'll be right there. And this is going to happen to you in other places. I was very interested to hear about the pilgrimage. You're going to be going on the same steps that the pilgrims went thousands of years ago. On the very same steps. They're still there. They haven't moved. They haven't been touched. Okay? So you're going to retrace the footsteps of incredible people who did amazing things. And I hope you enjoy every moment of that.
David, thank you for coming and being with us tonight. I'm going to close us with a prayer. I'm hoping you'll linger a bit for folks who may have something that they want to ask they didn't get to.
Sure.
And Beth will. Also, I'm going to have to go straight through that door because I have this other job as the pastor of this church in addition to being with you all. But we are going to meet Sunday at 4:50 again for our last meeting. And I hope to talk some about St. Mark's Church in Jerusalem, which is at the end of the book that we've been reading by James Martin, and answer final questions that you may have, because we'll say at the end of that meeting next week, Jerusalem, as we head out. So let's close with prayer. Thank you for this time together, Lord, for the chance to think and prepare and to hear. Help us to know we will be walking on the ground where heroes and heroines have gone before us, and to see and to feel and to sense what it was that was so meaningful, that called them, that they invested their lives in devotion in. When we make this prayer, knowing that indeed it is your Spirit that calls us. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.